Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the continuous testing meetup online. Let's start. At first, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, SourceLab, to Amusement and Training, to helping us to organize this meetup. Thank you again. So, in case you passed our last meetups, last events, please feel free to go to our website, continuoustestingmeetup.com. You will find there all meetups with and all video recording and the link to the video recording. Please go there and check the past events. So today I'm very happy to see here Parveen Sultana with her topic observability and quality engineering. Parveen is from London or based in London, and Parveen, the stage is yours.
Let me share my screen to start with. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about one of my most favorite topic, which is about observability and quality engineering. So, maybe let's start with asking everyone, like, have how many of you all already use this? Like, some of you have this process in your companies that you're working on. You've heard of the terminology, and you use observability within your quality engineering. Use your chat, and like, please do add your response. Okay. Okay. Please, yeah, Datadog, not yet heard. Okay, that's nice. Because I'm going to introduce that. Good, nice. Okay, thanks. Thanks for adding the responses. So, myself, I'm Parveen Khan. I'm quality engineering manager at CFC, working currently at London, UK, and I'm a co-host of one of the podcast, which is Quality Unfiltered. So please do check out. We do share a lot of learnings from our quality engineering and leadership. And I'm a Ministry of Testing ambassador, and I've shared some of the link where I do like not a very regular writer, but I try to write as much as I can where I have to share my learnings. So that's my blog post. So today I'm going to share about my previous experience. I'm going to talk about my like role, what I've done, what my experience was, and how I've joined there, and and how I got into this terminology of observability. So before even into getting into observability, I want to share it's all about my story. So I joined a company. It was a completely new team, and the product was completely built by external consultants, and we were building a forming new team, and the product itself was an automated invoice system which was built in a microservices architecture, which which means that there were multiple services working together at once. And of course, like when you join a new company, like when you see the completely new product, of course, I was very excited to dive in, and I was trying to learn a new product, and I was looking for areas like, where can we improve quality to start with. And when I joined this new team, as I said, the whole team was completely new because the external consultants were leaving, and we were building a completely forming up as a team to build in-house development team within the to build the product. Um, in the beginning, I did feel like starting like it's like a pile of a Lego blocks, which is why I said like I gave this image here. It is exciting to build when you have a lot of pieces there, but when you don't have any clear instructions, it feels a bit overwhelming as well, right? Because you have to figure out quite a lot of things and then build a picture out of it. So I was really excited to learn more about this product, and there was no documentation. There was very like all the consultants who had all the knowledge about the product had left. So it was more about, only thing left was like I could explore, I could speak to the product owner, and as a tester, anyone who joins a new team, it's more about you, more than reading a documentation, you kind of start exploring, right? So that's the same thing I did. I wanted to start. I started exploring the product by like trying to understand what this, because this was totally new domain for me. So trying to understand what this product is, by exploring it, by trying to talk to people who were there, and also trying to read some of the documentation. And of course, when I was doing that, I was feeling like, oh, it was starting to feel like, wow, this product is so complex because it has a lot of multiple services, and it was built in a completely different way. So I was like, oh my God, this is such a complex product. And it's not just about the complexity. I did notice something very different, like when I joined this. And this is somewhere like somewhere around like 2018, a story of where I'm sharing about this account team. So there was like quite a lot of frequent production incidents happening, literally like every day. It's not like we don't see any production incident. It's like a problem. Like it's not like a issue when you see a lot of prod incidents, but it's more about like it was. I felt very unusual that you see a lot of production incidents very frequently on every day, and I could see people panicking and everybody like, oh my God, we don't know, because the team was completely new. They were panicking, knowing that, oh my God, I don't know how to figure out this issue. And what used to happen is like the developers would immediately start picking up the issues. Of course, they would start investigating and they would start debugging, but they would spend a lot of time, sometimes even weeks, trying to figure out the root cause. And the and the trend that I would see was all the tickets would be marked as blocked because there was no information available for them to find out what the root cause is or to find out why this issue was happening. So for me, that was a surprise. More than having many production incidents as well, that was another surprise. But understanding how we are tackling the incidents was another surprise to me. So that really made me think like, okay, what is happening here? So we were like, okay, complex product, constant production incidents, and we kind of, the developer, the engineers blocking, marking those bugs as block because they cannot understand what's happening, and they could not fix that, and they had to go back to the consultants. So that's when I started asking myself, like, what could help us here? Like, what is it that could help the team here? So that really made me pause and think, to understand, like, oh, what's actually wrong here? Like, at this point, I stopped thinking like the product as a complex. Like, I stopped thinking like the product as a complex here. So just interesting enough, around the same time, I was reading a lot about observability. I didn't fully know where, like what it is and where can we use, what can it be used, and how is it associated with quality engineering. Nothing at all. But I was just curious to understand what is this new terminology that people are talking about. So I started experimenting. I signed up. So this is there was one of the tool which is still in the market, which is Honeycomb. So I tried. They had trial version. So I was very curious to understand like how can this help us in testing. So I signed up Honeycomb tool trial to understand, like to read their blogs, and I kept exploring other tools like Splunk, Dynatrace, Lightstep. So there was a lot of tools coming up at that point, right? So I was trying to see like what what can we make use of it. And the more I was trying to explore and observe, the more I started understand that both product and the processes around it. And that's when things started to click me. Like I was like, oh, I realized that observability isn't just about the tools, it's also about helping us really understand, look into our systems and improve the quality. And then at the same time, I was trying to connect how the developers are trying to debug our existing system. So I was trying to understand how the debugging is happening and why the engineers are blocking the stories. And I noticed that they were going to each service at that point in time and checking the logs manually using Notepad++. And like, yes, since the log were like stored separately in each service, they would end up like I could see like they would end up having multiple Notepad++ windows at the same time because they had to look for the logs in different services whenever there's kind of an issue. And the only way they could search through all these logs was like just pressing the Control F. It was really slow and frustrating for them, of course, right? And exactly why they were struggling to get the root cause very quickly. And it was for me as well. Like when I was trying to look for what's happening behind other than network tab. I was like, okay, I had to go open up multiple Notepad++ and have to search what log is coming up and what information is it throwing. So it was a painful process to go through, and it gives the context when you're looking into when you're debugging the issue is lost as well. So that kind of like out of all these observations, that kind of really hit me. If this is how we kind of dealing with the issues day to day, I was like, okay, no wonder why tickets a bit getting blocked and why, like, why we are having so many bugs coming up. So even though it was not like we didn't had any logs in place, but we did had some logs, and it did give us some information about the issues. It was not about that we don't have any observability. We did had, but they were not very helpful. So the logs were really very hard to search because they were stored in different services, and the logs were like and the devs would have to context switch continuously between different windows and different services. And we also, like as I said, we also had some telemetry data, but there was no dashboards or alerts to make it more actionable. And of course, like as I said, frustration was for developers that they are not able to find any information, and it's just delays and it blocks moving forward, right? And it's not just the frustration was just with the engineers, it was frustration with the business stakeholders too, because they couldn't communicate about what's going to happen with like when these issues are going to be fixed to the users, or and of course that kind of left unhappy users, right? So after like digging into how issues were handled, as I said, it became very clear for me that we had visibility, but that was a very little visibility into our system. And the engineers often couldn't find enough information while they were debugging, which is why so many tickets would end up in blocked. This kind of raised a question for me like, okay, we don't have, or we have little bit of visibility, so how can we build better visibility and actually have an observable system? So that's what brings us to observability. And what what is observability? If you like, of course, like if you search, if you Google it, right, you'll find a lot of different definitions. And yes, like, and you may also see like it's also termed as Oli. So for me, what observability is, you it's like you can understand what's happening inside your system just by observing from the outside of the system without having to ship new code every time you have a question. So whenever your systems are down, you need to answer questions to find the root cause as quickly as possible, right? So when you can answer those questions is what observability is for me. And this is one of the definition out of many. This is one of the simplest definition that I found. I really like is by Hazel Weekly, which is observability is the process through which one develops the ability to ask meaningful questions, get useful answers, and act effectively on what you learn. So it's more about like when the systems go down, like for example, if you have some kind of incidents or some kind of issue, it's like you kind of the ability to ask questions and find answers becomes really very critical, which is exactly what this code is explaining. So now that we know what observability is, the next question is like, how do we make systems observable? Like how does how can we implement observability? So the system needs to explain what's happening inside, right? And the answer to that is by having some data. And we need the right kind of data that lets us understand the system and its behavior and its health. So now thinking about how can we collect that data and what kind of data do we need to collect. So to answer to that question is by adding the right level of instrumentation, the right level of signals, metrics, logs, and traces into the system so it can tell a story, right? So now, yes, we know that this is the different type of data that we need to collect. Like what kind of data do we need to collect? As I said, it's more about we need to collect the data around logs, around metrics, and traces. So let's look into each one of it, what it means. Um, so let's start with logs. We all might have seen logs, right? Like regardless of what tool you use, you have seen logs when you testing, when you're developing. So a log is basically a message that contains information about something that's happening inside the system. So every log will always have a timestamp about to show that when did it happen, which is kind of like helps, right? Which is crucial because it helps understand the order of the events. So logs can also include other useful details, like for example, like which user made a request, or which service, the service came from which service, and this kind of data is like a very basic foundation for observability because it helps like piece together what happened when and why. So if we have this kind of logs that like that are searchable by running a query, that would have been very helpful. So it's like it's not just about having some logs in place, but it's about having meaningful logs, right? Which gives you meaningful information. And it's also about making sure we have centralized logs. As I said in my example, in my previous company example, right, we had logs, but it was all scattered across into different places, so we couldn't access it. So which is where it becomes so important that we have centralized logs so that we can just query them and use them and search them in one place. And it's again also having structured logs. And when I say structured logs, it's more about not just having very random information stored inside a log, but it's more about telling what's happening, having a right information message, putting at the right level, giving the timestamp, maybe adding as much information as possible to the log structure so it becomes structured. And when you look at multiple logs during any kind of like investigation, it helps you understand. It's not about just anyone can use that service, right? Like you might have implemented a service and you like anyone accessing the service, when they look into the log, they need to understand as well. So it's not it's so for it to understand, anyone can understand, it should be more structured so that people can understand that without having enough context, right? And at the same time, it also should be more like easily searchable logs. As I said, if they are centralized, then they become easily searchable. So if they are easily searchable, then you can query them and you can use that information what you have created during investigation. Now, what is a metric? The next type of data is what, other than log, is metric. A metric is basically a number, right? It's kind of a number that is representing some aspect of a system. So, metric, it kind of helps you understand both like the current and the historical state of the system, right? Because they can even trigger alerts if something goes wrong. So that's how you kind of make use of metrics, the data that's come from metric. For example, right? Um, System metric might show you memory usage, and you could have like application metrics that could track the request per second or maybe API error rates. And for example, business metric could be something like that could include how many users have logged in or signed up, right? And it's and then you can combine all these metrics, all this data, and trigger alerts, and you can create dashboards out of it. So it's up to you how you can make use of this data once you have access to this data. And when we combine both metrics with the logs, we can, as I said, we can build dashboards and alerts to monitor the system. So we have seen what logs are and what metrics is. What are those two different types of data? And now let's look at traces. So a trace is like, it tells you a story. Like you have seen all the traces when you debug, right? When you test and when you look at the network tab as well, even if you don't have access to any tools, it shows you the history. Like it tells you the story. It shows you the journey of a single request, or any kind of event that flows through the system, right? So traces kind of give you low level of details, and context that helps you figure out when and where to start debugging and which logs to look at. So when you combine all of these, when you combine traces with logs and metrics, we kind of start to build a fully observable system. So it kind of gives you the ability to see and monitor and understand the system behavior. So it's like once you have these, it's not just about, it makes it easier to debug issues, but also it can also help you answer questions about how customers, like your users, are interacting with your system, which is the most critical, for improving quality and experience. So it's more about, you get a lot of information, a lot of data. It's up to you now how you use that data. So, like when we are talking about observability, yes, of course, we do have to talk about monitoring as well, so that we understand what's the difference as well, right? So, for me, monitoring is about, it's all about known knowns, and observability is about unknown unknowns. With monitoring, you know what may go wrong, which is why you kind of create alerts and dashboards so that you can monitor. And uh, with observability, you don't know where or what may go wrong, which is why you want to build a lot of like logs or traces in place so that whenever something goes wrong, you have something available for you. And with monitoring, you know what data you may need. Like, you know what you want to monitor, and what dashboard you want to create. So you kind of know what data you need so that you can create those dashboards, right? With observability, you have no idea what data might be relevant and what data you might not be relevant. So you don't know how much, what is good enough and what is too much. And with monitoring, you can build the dashboards and you can set alerts. And with observability, the data that you have, you can use that for exploring, experimenting, and investigating. So for me, this is what the difference is. And like, it's clear, right? For observability, like with monitoring, it's all about the known knowns, and for observability, we deal with the unknown unknowns. So we don't know where things could go wrong, which is why we are creating observability. So, as like, this is one of the quote, like as Cindy Sridharan, they put it as like, it's not about logs, metrics, or traces, but about being data driven during debugging and using the feedback to iterate on and improve the product. So it's not just about just having some logs. It's not about just creating metrics or monitoring or dashboards or creating traces. It's more about how can you become data driven and knowing how to use that feedback from the debugging and to iterate on it and improve your product. So just like DevOps, observability isn't. It's not just about getting some tools, and saying that we are like DevOps. So it's more about the mindset and the cultural change. So tools alone won't, like, don't make a system observable. You need the right data, the ability to ask the questions and to explore and use the feedback to improve that. So now, like, you might think, like, how is it related? How does it relate to testers, and how can uh, to relate it to testers and quality, and how can we make use of it, right? So for me, like when we are performing exploratory testing, we kind of always, like, sometimes we find unexpected behavior, or you call it as an issue, and observability can help us dig deeper into those root cause. So can we can write better bug reports, right? So if, like, for example, if we cannot find enough information, it kind of highlights the gap that there's less instrumentation. So, which is where we as quality engineers can flag to improve the system as well, right? and and of course, like in practice, like I've used dev tools, like while using testing together, like to collect more context. But bug reports, like if you are creating any kind of bug reports, if it has more information, detailed and actionable, then it kind of helps the devs as well to fix the issues faster. But I wouldn't get enough information. So having these tools, like if you have access to any kind of observability tools that you have, like for example, it could be anything, right? It could be Splunk, it could be Datadog, it could be like any tools that you might use. If you have access to this, it's more easy to get those information, and that could be added while you're raising the bugs, and that could be helpful to the devs, to the engineers. So why does observability matters? Like observability tools help testers learn more about the system. It's not just about finding bugs and getting using that information and reporting that back, but it's more about also, like, it helps you understand the system. Because the more and more like you can look into the systems these days, like all are distributed microservices, right? It's hard to understand what's going on. So if you have access to these tools and you kind of make use of the information that's being built in as part of instrumentation, it helps you understand which services is talking to which service, what's happening during the journey when there are multiple services connected to each other. And then if you, again, as I said, if you can't find that information, then you need to give that feedback back to the engineers, so that instrumentation can be built, so it becomes even more meaningful and useful when actually system goes down. So to summarize, right, like testers, like, are kind of curious explorers. Like we kind of are very curious, we explore the system. It's not just about understanding the system, but also not testing, but also like we kind of explore, okay, what happens next, what happens when you do this, right? So it when you have access to data through observability, it kind of helps you faster debugging. It also helps in early feedback, and also it helps in continuous improvements. So to summarize, it also helps enables testing in production. Like it's not just about shifting to the left, but also it helps in shifting to the right as well, because you can see what's happening. It's not about just testing and releasing the feature, right? Once the feature is released, you can use this information, this data, to either monitor or either create the alerts or either look at the logs for any kind of error rates when once the feature is live, right? So that way it kind of enables testing in production as well. And it helps in creative exploration, because it helps you discover unknown unknowns and learn about the system and learn more about the product that you're working on, so that you just don't have to rely on documentation, or you just don't have to rely on people, but and not just relying on the UI, right? It's more about how can you use the data, and how can you understand what's happening behind the scenes. And it kind of feeds the insights into continuous improvement. As I said, it's more about, if you when something goes wrong in production, if something goes down and you are investigating, and if you can't find the root cause, and if you are unable to find any information while you're asking those questions, that's kind of a feedback. So using those insights, it kind of helps improving using those insights, and it kind of provides continuous improvement. And of course, right, you kind of encourage the teams to think differently about testing. It's not just about automation, and it's not about one dimension, right? It's not about having automation and everything is green, so that's it, right? It's more about what else, how can you what else can you use, like how can you make use of the latest technology. It's not just about running automation smoke test in production, and that's it, right? It's more about how can you make use of this instrumentation data, and then think about how the users are using the system, and use this information to improve your test as well. So it's about thinking differently about testing now that you have access to all these new tools and new process or new approaches. So yeah. Thanks. That's it from me. It's more about I just wanted to share about how we as a team had not have any understanding of what observability is and what was lacking, and then how we came up with what, like, this terminology was used, and how we implemented instrumentation on our product itself. And we moved, before I left that company, we moved from not having any tool in place to started using New Relic as a tool for like logging everything, creating the dashboards and monitoring into one place. And the team, like, we kind of built a community as well, observability community as well, observability champions as well, so that we can scale that processes and knowledge, and how do we approach into all the cross-functional teams, not just one team. So that's where we were when we left. And it's not just about, for me, the observability is not just about useful for only for one particular role. It's not just for the engineers. It's for quality engineers. It's for products. It's for all different roles. Like, they can make use of. It's all about how can you make use of this data? Like, it's for everyone. It's not just for one role. So that's what my experience that I wanted to share. So thanks for listening to me. So any questions? I'll be happy to take those.
Yeah, thanks for the insights. Do you have some most important statements if you how to start or where to start with observability? So if you would, if there's a new don't knowing anything, so which is the first step?
Yeah, I think that is where our team was. Like, we didn't know where to start from, and then we started from just logging as much as we can. I think we started from logs. Like, we started having meaning. Like, it's like starting raw. Like, I think we started off saying that, okay, we right now, the context that we were in, we were having the struggles and challenges of information being scattered. So the first step for us was to get everything in one place, and then start having logs, so and then creating queries so everyone can use that. So that was our first step. Depending on the context, I think because we had that challenge, we started off from solving that big challenge of getting. So we didn't start with New Relic as a tool, as I said, right? We started off our first steps from. We were using Azure DevOps, for example. We started using App Insights. We started using what we had from the basics, and then we got used to understanding how it benefits us as a team first. And then, as and when we saw how useful it was, how it was helping us during our investigation and debugging, we started following the processes of how can we now improve our instrumentation itself. It's not about just start adding instrumentation. Now we wanted to work on how can we better instrument it. So, like, how can we have structured log, how can we have meaningful logs, or can we have different types of logs, for example error logs, for example debug logs, or info log, and how can we, like, have the strategy around that. And then we started monitoring as well. So it's more about starting from small, and then once we were comfortable using that, the team was used to that, then we started using a different tool, which is New Relic. Yeah, any other questions?
I have one. In your opinion, how testers and developers should collaborate? For example, do you think testers could be helpful in defining the data to be put in the telemetry?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Mostly, I myself, and I encourage the quality engineers I work with as well. It's more about when you're testing a feature, you kind of pair, right? So when you're pairing, it's not just about testing the application itself. Like, I think more about, like, when we're testing, we should test the logs as well. It's not just about implementing something and like releasing, and then after something hits to production, not knowing what's not there, right? It's more about how can you test what have you implemented? Is it telling you meaningful information when you're actually exploring on the UI? Are you, when you are exploring on the product, like when you like, you know, something is gone wrong, are you able to understand, like, you know? And then if that's not helping you, then you need to give that feedback to the dev, and then they will improve. So I think that kind of helps a lot, and that helps the engineers as well, knowing that, because often, like, when you implement something, you feel like, oh, that's enough, right? So you kind of get that self biasness as well. And someone else, when you sit with them, when you pair, and when you actually do the testing, when you see like, oh, I don't understand this, and that's when it becomes more of a feedback. So this is where it becomes like, even with implementing observability, it becomes like you kind of shift it to the left, and you pair, and you use your curious mindset and exploratory skills to explore, and then understand, and then see what information your instrumentation is giving, and use that as a feedback to improve the logs or instrumentation that you have implemented. So that has worked well on my teams.
Makes sense. Thanks. I'll go for another one then. Are you including in the definition of done observability?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes. So I think we treat all these entities as a non-functional or a cross-functional requirements, right? So we do treat observability as part of like definition of done, to say it's like a check, like to say like, have we? It's not about just saying that have we implemented logs or anything like that. It's more about being proactive in, like, because it helps you be proactive instead of being reactive, the whole observability itself, right? So it's more about helping the teams to say like, okay, like you have this as a definition of done when you're thinking about all the functional tests that you're writing, or you have to implement. What is it, like teams need to understand what you need to implement as a team, and then have it as as part of definition of done, so that teams follow that as a regular process and practice, instead of like not thinking about it at all. Because that kind of, once you have it on definition of done, I think that's kind of like triggers like question of like, oh, what do we have to implement, how much, or what is the approach, like what is the best practices, and that kind of creates a discussion, and kind of create a process and approach towards it, and then the teams will use that, and then it becomes like more common, regular practice. It becomes more of a regular practice once you start putting it into definition of done.
Yeah, definitely. By default, of course, teams do not put this on the requirements. So
Yeah.
features is it, but
Yeah.
a mature team do.
Yeah, I mean, some teams also, like, they do write some acceptance criteria as well, right, around this. Like it's like writing technical acceptance criteria to say like, this is what I expect as a team, like, you know, when you're implementing the logs, so that it becomes more like you write it, and then it's kind of a requirement itself as well for observability, and then you test it, and then you confirm.
Can I go next? Hi, Praveen. This is Ash. And you might have touched on this point a little bit with the other questions that were asked to you, but I want to ask you, as as someone from the quality side, right? And not being part of a team, like if you're not in a professional environment, but you kind of want to explore to see what I personally feel is that the whole observability comes from like a team effort. There's a lot of effort coming from developer side, DevOps, and it kind of is a very it comes from many sources, the effort, and not having like that level of access to the code base, and um, or any of those things, or complex systems and services. What do you think would be a good idea if we had to kind of do a little bit more of a hands-on delving, like will it be as simple as go find something on GitHub and uh, clone a repo, and this is the way you could plug in things. So just wanted to hear about it, and if you will consider doing a demo or a meetup in the future, if you would accommodate that.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Ash. So I kind of like, yeah, I can relate to that totally. Like, especially when you don't have anything implemented and you don't have access to the tools, and it becomes difficult, right? So it's again, observability is not something like when you look at, for example, automation, right? Like you can build a POC, you can show the benefits, and you can start pushing the team, and you can start get the buy-in, right? It's not about pushing as well. But with observability, it's so much like it's such a whole, like the whole team needs to like it's more becomes like an engineering effort where you have to implement that in the first place only then. But then I think you can always start, like myself in one of the team that I worked, I had very similar like a story where like we didn't had anything, but we know things we needed this after my previous work experience, but no one knew how where to start from, and no one, which that was the reason why people didn't want to implement that. So it's more, and then the way I started was like we used to have this production incidents, and we whenever there's an incident, right, you kind of join as a group, you kind of try to come up debug together. So I used to join those calls, and I used to observe, I used to ask those questions, okay, what's happening here, why are we not knowing what's happening? So like observing few instant like those kind of incidents and being on those calls, and then taking that examples back to the dev team, engineering team, to say like, look, why were we not able to understand if we had and introducing them to the concept. Sometimes they might not be implementing that because they might not know the concept itself, or they themselves might not have access to the tools itself. So it's about if you like, I think that's how it is. It's more about like how can you help them understand this concept, and how can you help them understand what the benefits is, and how, and showing them how they can implement. It's not about you implementing the solution, but I think showing giving some resources, maybe like for example like how others have implemented, or some kind of blogs and that's exactly where I think I was trying to use the free trials of the tools to understand myself, so that I can show it to the teams to say like, look, this is a tool. But again, if it is a paid tool, not every company might invest into it as well, right? So it's more about showing what the possibilities are and what the benefits are if we have it, and using, I would always use the production incidents as a one of the feedback, like to say like, if we know more information, maybe it would have been like resolved in so much time, or maybe using that as a feedback basically. So I think it's more bringing that information to the team and talking like whoever is the decision maker, right, talking to them. And the way also I tried to do was like getting the demo from the tools as well. So inviting people to do the demo of the tool, so that it becomes like a topic for people to talk about, and starting to think about, do we need this? And as I said, right, it's not about buying a tool itself as well. Like we just started from basics, like what tool we had App Insights. So we just started using that and started saying that, shall we just implement more instrumentation as part of the feature, like let's consciously start using that. I think that's where um, it starts where people will think, and then you can improve more, and then it becomes more of like, okay, what tool do we need for that? Because now we know the concept, now we know, we started using it, but we have challenge with this tool. So it's more about, to summarize, like it's more about introducing them to the concept, introducing them how outside other companies are using this for their benefits and how it is helping them, and
Right.
use one of your pain point, and then bring that example to say, if we had this, then this could have been solved or something like that.
I
Hope that
understand. I think you
helps.
make some, yeah, I think you made some great points, but I feel like maybe I did not specifically ask you the kind of scenario I'm looking at, so I'll just do a quick follow-up if you're able to cover it. I was asking more of what if I'm not in a team setting, like if I just have my laptop and, like I know that if I had to learn or advance more in like, writing automated tests, I know that I'll more likely find a way to do, especially if it's like a UI based test. I feel like there are many ways now to go with it, but if I had to independently explore these things, I feel like I might be lost a little bit, So I just wanted to know if you ever came across, or if you do in the future, as a guidance to not feel overly lost or go down a rabbit hole and be able to, showcase your skills a little bit in depth and observability.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, we can, I can, we can connect. Like, if you could connect on LinkedIn or somewhere, maybe it's more about we can continue this chat, and I think it's more about we can discuss about this, and I'm happy to continue this discussion over there.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, because nowadays, we do have we do have a lot of resources. I think when I started understanding about observability, I think it was very hard. Like, it took me a lot of time to understand the concept itself and how that concept is helpful for quality engineering. So I think now it's more like there are so many resources out there. Like, one of the resources that I used was Test Automation University, where you have very specific courses around observability by Abby Banzer. So there are, as I said, there are many resources out there now. So one of the things that I can definitely recommend is check out Test Automation University and Observability course by Abby Banzer.
Sure, thank you.
There is one question from Jürgen.
Have you used OpenTelemetry? What do you think? I think you all start with what's what's available, right? Like, I think in my teams, some of the teams that I worked with, we did use OpenTelemetry. Like, I've not personally implemented myself, but my teams have used OpenTelemetry. So I'm more I would say, I'm more I was more like a consumer of what's coming out of that OpenTelemetry, but I have not implemented myself using OpenTelemetry. Hope that helps. Hope that answers the question. But were you looking for something around OpenTelemetry? I think feel free to connect. I've just given my QR code. I think I've had my LinkedIn stuff, and I think on my blog post as well, I have a section where I've shared all the resources and how I've explored around. I do have some of the stuff that were around observability. So please, do check that and reach me out on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect and talk more about this topic.
So thank you very much, Parveen. Then you can stop sharing your slides. Okay, so thank you very much again. It was really interesting topic, and we had really a lot of questions today. So what's going next? We already planned our next meetup, 18th of March. So in 1 month, we will have Eddie's talks with his topic, accessibility testing live, simple test everyone should know. So I hope I will see you there, and have a nice evening. Thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.